Hi class, it's Jamie Batts, your instructor for Bio 220. I am doing this video kind of different than what I've done your other videos. I didn't like the way the PowerPoint that the textbook had with it went along with this chapter. So I'm just going to lecture like this and point out particular things in the book that I think you should draw your attention to, and I'll kind of give my 2 cents and how I remember things and that type of a thing with this. I apologize for my hair. It's like a really humid, rainy day today, and my hair just looks crazy on those days. I'm sure you don't care. All right. Looking at your book, and again, I'm just in your textbook following along. This is chapter 14, which is the integration and control of the nervous system and how it's regulated. So this chapter basically summarizes sensation and the pathways that are coming and going with your central nervous system out into the periphery. So here we're going to talk about receptors, and that's really what this first section is all about, getting all of the visceral and sensory receptors into the nervous system. And so there's several pathways for this and several ways that these senses are classified. There's a graphic organizer, figure 14.1 on page 693. This breaks down your general senses from your special senses. Special senses are covered in a different chapter. In this chapter, we're looking at the general senses and how that information, whether somatic or visceral, is coming into your central nervous system. So the big difference, somatic, is dealing with your conscious control and what you're aware of. This is your proprioception, where your body is in space, whether or not your hands are like this or your hands are like this, or temperature, pain, etc. And then the visceral is all the inside stuff that you're not aware of and that you really can't control from a conscious level. The figure on 14.2 on page 464 just shows you some of those general sensory nerve endings that are within your skin. Again, for my purposes, I'm not going to give you a diagram for the lecture portion of the course, but your lab instructor might do that. So you may need to be familiar with those in the diagram. For my purposes, you just need to know what they are and what they do, not how to identify them on a diagram. The chart is doing the same thing, just summarizing what they are and what they do. The 2-point discrimination on 465 is probably something you're going to do in lab. It's kind of interesting, looking at how many nerve endings are controlling different areas or regulating different areas of your skin, and how it's much more sensitive in something like your hands as opposed to like the back of your arm. The 2-point threshold is going to be much further apart on the back of your arm than it is on the palm of your skin. The muscle spindle and Golgi tendon organs are special sensory receptors that are located within our skeletal muscle. This has to do with overextending and overstretching your muscles, as well as knowing whether or not your muscles are contracted or relaxed. So that's going to play a role there. What you'll see on page 466 is a comparison of primary and secondary receptors. And so with the primary receptor, you're looking at one that is directly receiving the stimulus. With a secondary receptor or a secondary sensory neuron, you're getting a receptor, and that receptor is then sending signals, usually through neurotransmitters, to the actual sensory neuron, and that is sending it to the central nervous system. So the secondary one is just the information is being relayed through a different receptor, whereas the primary one is acting as the receptor itself. The difference between tonic and phasic receptors. Tonic are the ones that are slow adapting. So this is, you walk outside, you feel that it's breezy, and then you no longer notice that breeze anymore because you're outside for, an extended period of time. But then all of a sudden the breeze picks up and then you feel it again, right? That's the phasic receptors that are kicking in. So your phasic receptors are detecting a change in that background level of stimulation that your body has adapted to. Other sensory pathways. So the next section that starts on page 467 is going through the different sensory pathways up and down your spinal column your spinal column, and relaying that information up into your conscious awareness. All the sensory information is relayed through the thalamus. That's probably the most important thing you need to know in this chapter. And you can see some of these pathways, for instance, on 469, the spinothalamic tract, it's going from free nerve endings, it's synapsing with an interneuron in the gray matter, and then it's traveling up the spinothalamic, listen to the word spinothalamic, spinal cord, thalamus, right? That's telling you where it's going. So it's going to go up to the thalamus, and then from there, it's going to be relayed through what's called a tertiary neuron to the cerebral cortex for our conscious awareness and perception. So those pathways, the ascending sensory pathways, are diagrammed for you on page 468. You should be familiar with the pathways and what their functions are. So in other words, that the spinothalamic pathway is pain, temperature, light, touch, right? The spinal-reticular pathway is pain. So these are, again, just the different pathways as they go up through the spinal cord, and then they're all going to synapse in the thalamus to then a third order neuron, which goes to the cortex. The 470 is showing you the spinocerebellar tracts. This is all with body positioning, where our body is in space. And then you can see the regional functions of the cerebral cortex on page 471, just showing you where these things are on the brain in terms of their association areas. 472 and 473 is talking about different types of pain: referred pain, chronic pain, phantom pain. You should be familiar with these different types of pain and why they occur. So why does referred pain occur? Referred pain is where you're physically experiencing pain in a different area than where that pain is originating from, right? You're feeling a heart attack down the left side of your arm instead of in your actual heart. Or you're feeling gallbladder pain in your back. That happens, your upper back, usually your shoulder area. And then chronic pain, phantom pain, you get something amputated or removed, but somehow you still feel pain in that area. All important pains to be aware of. The next section introduces you to the concept of a sensory homunculus. This is on 474. The sensory homunculus is just your kind of proportioned area of your primary sensory cortex that has a schematic view of how many sensory neurons you have for each area of the body. So in other words, if you look at this, you see that the lips are really, really big on this diagram, but something like the ankle is relatively small. Well, what that means is we have more sensory nerve endings in our lips than we do in our ankle. That's all that's showing you. And then you have a motor homunculus, which is described for you on the next page, 475. It's pretty much the same kind of proportions. Obviously, like something like our tongue. Think about all the motions our tongue does as we're speaking. It's moving around in my mouth. It's going forward and backward and side to side and up and down so that I can pronounce all of these words, right? And so that's why there's much, much motor control with the tongue. And then just like we had several sensory ascending pathways going up, we have descending motor pathways coming down from our cerebral cortex out through our motor neurons. So typically, there's just an upper motor neuron and a lower motor neuron, as you'll read in this chapter. And there's the corticospinal, corticobulbar, and then some indirect pathways, which are usually relayed through the like the brainstem and the midbrain. And again, those are diagrammed out for you on the chart on page 476. And some of them are, you actually have some pictures on page 478 to look at for those. Wrapping up the chapter, there's a discussion on the basal nuclei, which are responsible for our background patterns of movement, like walking. The first time you learn to walk, it's kind of hard, right? Imagine those little one-year-olds trying to put those steps together. They're a little uncoordinated and clumsy. But after you learn to walk through the years, you don't really have to think about walking anymore, right? You just kind of get up and do it. And that's because your basal nuclei are taking over and controlling that background pattern of movement. Next little section is on the reticular activating system. This is our awareness, and this is also helping integrate some of our emotions. The reticular activating system is closely related to what we call the limbic system, which isn't discussed until later in the chapter, I think. Yeah, I don't know why your book organizes it like that, but the reticular activating system is really just keeping your conscious awareness. Are you listening to my voice and you're kind of drowning out because I'm boring? Maybe. Or are you taking conscious notes and you're really engaged in what I'm saying? So that's all your reticular activating system. Then you have speech centers. There's a little bit on EEGs and the different types of waves, which you should be familiar with. Again, I'm not going to test you on what these waves look like. Your lab instructor might. Memory and the limbic system. Limbic system is all of our emotions, rage, and love, and all of those things. Appetite, etc. And then at the end of the chapter, as always, there's the introduction of aging, and with everything, it gets a little slower. The last section is about stroke and how stroke can affect all of the different systems of your body. This video, I know, was not as in detailed as a typical lecture PowerPoint, but I went through and I just used your book and highlighted the important things that I think you should spend extra time on, and try to describe for you some of the basics here out of chapter 14. So as always, let me know what questions you have. I'd be happy to help you, and have a great day.